Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'm Ron Mackenzie Lavergy. Yes, it's time for yet another entry to our Cthulhu series, this time focusing on one of the most popular entities in the entire mythos, Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, is the incredibly powerful malign deity found in the Cthulhu mythos, who wanders the earth using a wide variety of masks or avatars. He was created by Lovecraft after he had one of the most horrible and realistic dreams of his life. But what if this was not a fictional creature inspired by the dreams of the disturbed Lovecraft, but actually existed? Let's explore. If you want more What If videos, check out our biggest What Ifs playlist on the channel. Now get ready, it's time to ask the question, what if Nyarlathotep was real? As with other videos in this series, this video will assume that Nyarlathotep is the only Lovecraftian entity that exists. For the purposes of this video, the other gods and old ones, as well as his minions, do not exist. Furthermore, as with many Lovecraftian horrors, the name of Nyarlathotep has a number of pronunciations. The most realistic one I found is this one by Lehman Kessler of Ask Lovecraft. The closest pronunciation I've been able to find is Nyarlathotep. However, I'll be saying the name a lot, and that's way too hard to say, so I'll just anglicize the hell out of it and say Nyarlathotep. That way it reflects some of the Egyptian origin of the name, since Hotep is an Egyptian word meaning to be at peace. With that out of the way, let's hop in. Nyarlathotep is quite different from other Lovecraftian horrors. While most beings in the mythos speak an ancient, incomprehensible language, Nyarlathotep is able to communicate in any human language. Also, following the Great War, most of Cthulhu's kind were exiled, with most elder gods exiled to the stars, like Yog-Sothoth, and many great old ones slumbering beneath the ground, like Cthulhu or Yog-Sothoth. Nyarlathotep, on the other hand, is not trapped, and is best known for his propensity to walk the earth under a number of guises, and influence humanity in a number of ways. For example, when he emerged from Egypt, he was said to be a tall, swarthy man of the old native blood, looking like a pharaoh. This is how he is typically described, but it is far from the only way he has appeared. For example, when he appeared in China, he took on the appearance of a morbidly obese woman with 5 mouths and many tentacles, referred to as the bloated woman. He has been seen as complicated machinery, referred to as the TikTok man, when engaging with technologically advanced civilizations. More recently, he took on the appearance of an African-American pimp in Los Angeles, going by the name Mr. Skin. This is to say that you really never know how Nyarlathotep will appear until it's too late. Nyarlathotep is often depicted as the messenger of the outer gods, acting as a servant of Azathoth, his father. In terms of actual power, Nyarlathotep is one of the most widely debated beings in the mythos. Some believe him to be second only to Azathoth, while others consider him a mere lackey. Sadly, the stories are vague enough that it's difficult to say for sure how powerful he is. However, he is highly gifted at gaining followers. He's able to force others to worship him, as was seen when the Fellahin, Egyptian peasants, knelt before him, even though they didn't know why they were doing it. He then went on to roam the earth using magical devices to force unwilling humans to follow him. This was done with the help of amazing, seemingly magical instruments as he drew people in with the spectacle. This was all inspired by a nightmare Lovecraft had, and many believe the character may have been partially based on Nikola Tesla, who used similar amazing instruments to baffle and transfix crowds. But what if this outer god was not spawned in a dream, but actually existed? Frankly, if we're describing a tall, thin man who's excellent with technology, great at drawing supporters, and quick to anger, a certain someone comes to mind. Of course, Elon Musk almost certainly is not an avatar for an outer god, but there is a good chance that Nyarlathotep would take on a similar form if he was to appear in the modern day. But what exactly would happen if this was the case? Well, that would depend on his goals. In the literature, he has acted in a wide variety of ways. Sometimes he seems intent on enslaving all humanity, sometimes he's simply acting as a messenger, and sometimes he actually helps us, with some reports claiming that he aided us in moving forward technologically. Since this video will assume that there are no other outer gods for whom Nyarlathotep would be a messenger, let's focus on his other aims. Unfortunately, if Nyarlathotep wished to enslave humanity, it's likely that there wouldn't really be much we could do about it. Based on the literature, Nyarlathotep seems to be pretty unstoppable. Not only does he possess immense power, but he is also believed to be highly intelligent and cunning. It's likely that any attempt to stop him would be for naught, and humanity would likely be enslaved and forced to worship him. As was seen in the prose poem Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft, his unwilling followers would be unable to resist the call of the outer god. Even the most headstrong and stubborn would stand no chance against the irresistible will of the entity. Of course, it would take time for him to take control of everyone on Earth, but with his immense power combined with his ability to change his form, it would be just about impossible to stop him. When reports of a man wandering the Earth enslaving humans were confirmed, it's possible that people would turn to suicide in order to avoid becoming a slave. Many would, of course, try to hide away and avoid the outer god, but most people would either end up dead or enslaved. Nyarlathotep would become the new god of the world, although he would be better seen as a devil. He would force us to work for him and reshape the world as he deems fit. He might even subject humanity to gruesome experiments, both in the pursuit of knowledge and to bask in our suffering. Certain humans might gain his favor and become empowered, perhaps even becoming his 4 horsemen, but for the majority of humanity, this would likely go badly. However, it's possible that being led by Nyarlathotep would not be the worst thing in the world. If he was happy at the top, it's possible that he would use humans to create an amazing world of technology. Sadly, we might not actually be able to enjoy it since his slaves tend to go rather mad, but if he eventually released his grasp on the human race, we might be able to enjoy a world of technology and wonder, and might even venture off into space. Perhaps we would come to accept him as our god and will become willing followers, allowing us to retain our sentience while working to serve his goals. On the other hand, it's possible that he would not wish to be the great leader of Earth, but would prefer to send it into ruins. In this case, he might manipulate things such that two factions of humans were created, both worshipping a different avatar. He would make it so that we destroyed each other using all weaponry available, including nuclear weapons, as he watched in glee. Given his love of madness and death, this would be the best of both worlds for Nyarlathotep. And now we return to our question, what if Nyarlathotep was real? Well, without other gods to serve, he would likely try to take the helm by himself. He would wander the earth, enslaving the human race with the help of his magical instruments, bringing us all under his control. Some might die in struggles or to avoid becoming a mindless slave, but most would likely fall prey to his enchanting ways. This could be the end of humanity, but it could also lead us to great technological progress, and eventually we might even come to accept Nyarlathotep as our leader, thanks to some strange eldritch Stockholm syndrome. On the other hand, he may realize that leading us is just not his bag, and might use his great influence to cause humanity to destroy itself. Although, frankly, the way things are looking politically, that might not be a huge change to our trajectory.
Howard Phillips Lovecraft has been credited with the creation of some of the most existentially terrifying beings of all time. Merely catching a glimpse of these abominations would be enough to send a person of average fortitude into the awful depths of eternal madness. Some are so far beyond our comprehension, it would be impossible to even imagine interacting with them. The mind-rending would happen so quickly we wouldn't even know it hit us. However, there is one outer god who is more tangible to the common human, and the way he would play with our mortal souls is potentially far more horrible than anything Cthulhu or Yog-Sothoth could throw our way. Nyarlathotep, the most human of Lovecraft's creations, would much rather see you suffer instead of simply eviscerating your brain and body. Hello my fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your disembodied voice in the void, CTHULHUS, and today we're posing the following proposition. What if Nyarlathotep was alive today? Before we get started, make sure to give us a big thumbs up down below and subscribe if you want more terrifying content. Let's get started. First, a quick overview of the terror that is Nyarlathotep. The skinless one, the faceless god, the dweller in darkness, the crawling chaos. A shapeshifter with thousands of forms and just as many names, Nyarlathotep plagues all who come close with vivid and endless nightmares. Unlike many of the other Lovecraftian gods, he is free to roam the earth as he pleases. Despite all the horrific forms he embodies, Nyarlathotep is considered to be the most human of the outer gods. This humanity is actually the trait that makes him so terrifying. He is a manipulative mastermind of human pain and misery. Cruel and sadistic, Nyarlathotep takes pleasure in driving humans insane. As son of Azathoth, he has the power to destroy our world. However, it seems as though he wants to stick around and cause more chaos. He just wants to watch the world burn. Now that we're all up to date on what we're dealing with here, I have some ideas as to what would happen if he were alive and kicking on planet Earth today. The first thing Nyarlathotep would do is amass countless followers to do his bidding. He's been known to do this in the past, like in the H.P. Lovecraft short story bearing his name as the title. In this story, Nyarlathotep takes the form of a man who looks like an Egyptian pharaoh and roams the earth, gathering legions of followers through demonstrations of seemingly magical feats. After convincing enough people to join him, the world collapses, with nothing and no one left not under his control. I would say that he wouldn't need to use magic to gain followers today. He wouldn't even have to roam. Instead, being the crafty trickster he is, Nyarlathotep would use the power of the internet to amass followers left and right. He would use YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, forums, and much more to find and brainwash millions of people into doing his bidding. These folks would become brainless automatons and do whatever he wished. His shape-shifting abilities would make this much easier as well, as he could take the form of different people to reach new audiences. He could also use new servants and speak through them on many platforms to ensure that all avenues are being utilized at all times. Anyone not convinced at first would eventually have their trusted sources replaced with followers of Nyarlathotep slinging lies and deceit. Common sense can't prevail against insurmountable odds, unfortunately. People believe anything they hear online anyways. Hell, I could be an embodiment of Nyarlathotep and you wouldn't even know it. He'd even get your tech-illiterate grandparents on his side. The internet is one way for him to amass followers, but he would eventually connive his way onto TV channels too. That kind of influence is unparalleled, especially when Graham doesn't know how to change the channel. I don't think he would stop at just video content either. Soon enough, he would have his slimy tendrils infiltrating every aspect of pop culture. Musicians, athletes, authors, even doctors would spread his serpentine lies. No media or information on Earth would escape his tainted influence. Once the crawling chaos deems his followers to be plentiful enough, he would begin infiltrating positions of power and using his influence to fundamentally change the way the world works. At this point, he would have the means to take over any position of power he wants. Any person standing in his way would be assimilated or driven mad. Political opponents, public dissenters, major protesters, they would all be visited by the faceless god himself in one of his many sanity-shattering forms. Upon being driven mad, they would be reported as suffering breakdowns from excessive stress or falling ill. Just another reason not to stand against the Dark One. Purposefully bad policy decisions would be made with the express purpose of pitting people against each other. Meaningfully divisive laws, unfair rules, conflicts started under false pretenses. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? All of these decisions would have the appropriate propaganda to back them up, as Nyarlathotep is known to be a master propagandist. As much as we'd like to believe otherwise, nobody is immune to propaganda. All of this would culminate in massive human misery and a great deal more folks falling under the influence of the Dweller in Darkness. After a little while, he wouldn't even have to put in effort. We usually do this kind of stuff without help from a cosmic being. A little push from an outer god and society starts to topple. Now, once all this starts to roll along, it would be time for step 3 of the evil plan. Drive all remaining humans to madness and begin the downfall of humanity. People tend to look for leadership when things are going bad. So as society starts to crumble, the populace will look to those in positions of power for help. Too bad. Nyarlathotep has taken over all the positions of power. I can see it now. A press conference is called to address the mounting issues facing our modern society. Millions have tuned in to see what possibly could be done and are waiting with bated breath. The world leader takes the stage and steps up to the podium. He looks out to the audience, draws in a deep breath, and explodes into a massive writhing abomination with countless eyes, legs, mouths, and other nameless extremities. At this point, most people would be driven mad, and the rest would be convinced that it's the end of days. We'd be convinced that all the bad things we've done up until this point have culminated into an apocalyptic scenario, and it's all our fault. Nothing left to do but give in to the existential dread. Screams of pain and terror fill the night sky as Nyarlathotep revels in our collective realization. And he wouldn't just watch us tear ourselves apart at this point. Oh no. He, as a massively powerful shapeshifter, would make use of these abilities to make the process so much more painful. He would call upon the powers of the outer gods and use them himself to torment and torture the last inhabitants. The spread of madness is one of Nyarlathotep's greatest pleasures. At some point among this chaotic purge, Nyarlathotep would likely get bored. Hard to believe, I know, but he would. Huge swaths of people would die, and eventually madness would run its course. There are only so many things people can do while mad before they just become husks of their former selves. At that point, what else is there for Nyarlathotep to do? Just toy with the equivalent of human dolls? That's no fun. So at this point, why not just destroy the entire planet? Go out with a bang. As the outer god known best for doing the bidding of other outer gods, he'd probably take it upon himself to summon some of his cosmic creators to the earthly plane. They would come forth from their forbidden dimension and have a ball annihilating whatever's left. Although I'm sure humans would have done a pretty good job of breaking everything already. When there's nothing left to wreck, I suppose it's time to say goodbye to the planet as a whole. Into the void it shall go, lost to time and space.
If you're a fan of any of H.P. Lovecraft's work, then you know exactly what you're in for. The way this guy created some of the scariest, sickest, most frightening, and sadistic monsters, if that's even what you'd refer to them as, really puts the SCP Foundation to shame. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of SCPs, but comparing Lovecraft's work to the Foundation's, it's like comparing Michael Jordan to Steph Curry. They're both good, but only one of them's the GOAT. And of all the horrific beings and creatures that Lovecraft has created over the years, from the very well-known Cthulhu to the lesser-known yet just as terrifying Nyarlathotep, well, Let's just say this video is going to be a fun one. Regardless of your Lovecraftian knowledge, one look at any of his monsters and you're bound to need a new pair of undies. Which brings us to today's questions. What if Nyarlathotep existed in 2021? One thing is for sure, it leads to a pretty world. Get it? Because everyone would be pooping their pants. Alright, let's get into it and smash the like button, guys. So what makes this thing or being or entity, whatever you want to call it, so different from the numerous other creations that Lovecraft has birthed? Well, as you may know, most of the outer gods are living somewhere far out in the universe among the stars. This includes Yog-Sothoth and Azathoth. There's also everyone's favorite, Cthulhu, who is known as one of the Great Old Ones, which are all in a deep slumber, only destroying mankind and the entire planet when they wake up. Nyarlathotep, however, walks among us in the disguise of a human being. And that in itself makes this question that much scarier. It's believed it actually has over 1,000 forms or manifestations, as they're referred to, all of which will drive anyone mad at just the sight. But the one form this thing takes on Earth is that of a human, which, to no surprise, makes it incredibly hard to track. This of course also makes things much easier for Nyarlathotep to blend in with society, which in itself is problematic, regardless of which year we're living in. But what exactly is this thing's purpose? Well, unlike the other godly figures, it seems Nyarlathotep is actually the one who serves or takes care of business. With the other gods having cults do their deeds, Nyarlathotep appears to serve the cults and lead them in the absence of the other outer gods. Also being the servant of Azathoth, it seems Nyarlathotep isn't necessarily on the same level as the other gods, but potentially sits between the outer gods and Great Old Ones and the cult members, in a league of its own, right in the middle, or so it seems. But that doesn't mean Nyarlathotep doesn't have the power to completely erase the human race and planet off the face of the universe. Oh no, don't underestimate this thing. As previously mentioned, Nyarlathotep disguises itself as a human to walk the earth. It walks the walk and talks the talk, being one of the only beings in Lovecraft's universe to use human languages instead of the alien languages. Now, what makes Nyarlathotep so terrifying is that unlike the other godly figures who don't necessarily have a clear-cut plan or goal, Nyarlathotep does. Just pure manipulation and deceit. In fact, Nyarlathotep prefers to enjoy the madness and destruction over the death of certain things, which again appears to make it more sadistic than the others. So what if Nyarlathotep was real in 2021? Well, I can't say for sure that it would start destroying everything and everyone, because we don't know for sure. It seems there is a common consensus that at some point, Nyarlathotep will put an end to the human race and Earth altogether, but when or if that happens is another question in itself. Aligning with the outer gods and being referred to as their, I quote, messenger, heart, and soul, as well as, I quote, the immemorial figure of deputy or messenger of hidden and terrible powers, I think it's a very safe bet to say that if this thing was real in 2021, then 2021 would probably go down as the worst year in the history of all time. I mean, what year can top this thing just coming to Earth and completely destroying everything? Now again, maybe that's not what happens. Maybe Nyarlathotep has plans to do something in the year 2050 or 2500. Just because Nyarlathotep would be real and walking among us doesn't necessarily mean it would start causing death and destruction right away. However, it is also quite possible that's exactly what it does, with goals to not only destroy the human race and Earth as a whole, but to make it as horrifying, painful, destructive, and just as mad as possible. It seems if Nyarlathotep were to have a goal, aside from serving the outer gods, or of course Azathoth, which is its main priority, it would simply be just to spread destruction and madness. What that means for us, unfortunately, isn't good. How Nyarlathotep would choose to spread his madness and destructive ways would be at its own discretion. Maybe it would recruit cult members to just go around doing awful things to people. And I'm not talking about throwing a pie in the face or, I don't know, like breaking into someone's car or house, but like real awful things. Like brutally attacking them. Have you guys ever heard about Charles Manson? Starting to sound a lot like he was the real life Nyarlathotep. I mean, for all we know, maybe this thing creates or even manifests itself as an airborne illness that becomes a pandemic, you know? Now that could be a bit of a stretch, but I mean, if you guys really think about how awful our world has been the last few years, I mean, between the fires in Australia, California, the Amazon, the pandemic, the social injustices going on worldwide, it seems like the last few years have been full of destruction and chaos. So maybe Nyarlathotep existed in 2020.
Do you think we'll ever get tired of pitting incredible creatures against each other? All signs point to no, considering all the different bouts we get to see every day. MMA fights, Freddy v. Jason, your dad versus anyone who touches the thermostat. Fights are integral to the very core of our being as humans. Or so they say. Maybe we just like to watch things hitting other things. So today, I bring you a very strange, impossible, lopsided fight. Get ready. Hello fellow friends and philosophers, and welcome back to the most mind-bending channel on YouTube, Life's Biggest Questions. I'm your disembodied voice in the void, CTHULHUS, and I'm bringing a question to the table that I never thought would be addressed. What if Nyarlathotep fought SIRÉN? Crazy, I know. But we need to know. The general public must have answers. Before we ring the bell on this fight, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe for more big questions. Alright, let's get started. In this corner, we have Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, the god of 1,000 forms, the dweller in darkness. With infinite forms and powers to match, this fighter has overturned entire societies and speaks for the cosmic outer gods. With an infinite win-loss ratio, it's been a while since anyone has seen this unbelievable being even flinch. In the challenger's corner, we have Siren Head. Online creepy creature and fan favorite, this 40-foot telephone pole lures hikers in with the sounds of their loved ones and then eats them. Watch out, it might just start shouting incomprehensible numbers and phrases and make things extra spooky. Fighters, to your corners. Are you ready? Set, fight. Wait, it's over? Already? How long was that? Did you even have a chance to ring the bell? Wow, well, okay. Nyarlathotep comes out on top. Not that anyone expected anything different. Okay, now that we've let that play out, let's try something a little bit different. It's obvious that the cosmic horror is way stronger than a relatively new forest cryptid. Pitting these two against each other would end in a very one-sided victory for Nyarlathotep. He would clap our poor pole's head in a fraction of a second. No ifs, ands, or buts. There's just no comparing power levels on these two. It's like comparing apples to oranges. Wait, no. I mean apples to a fighter jet. Actually, it's like comparing apples to Goku. Yeah, that sounds about right. It would just be too easy. It's not very likely that Nyarlathotep would even be interested in fighting Siren Head. And even if something compelled him to seek out that fight, it would be over in 0 minutes, 0 seconds, 2 milliseconds. Unfortunately, our long boy would take a long nap. And if there were lots of Siren Heads, well, they would go extinct. Sorry, Siren fans, so that's that. I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching. Okay, fine. Wait up a second. Because I'm in a good mood, and because I like to have fun, let's come up with a scenario where Siren Head would have a fighting chance at lasting longer than an astronaut without a helmet. How are we gonna make this work? Well, one is an omnipotent, shape-shifting Lovecraftian outer god, a direct descendant of Azathoth, with the potential to enslave and ruin entire modern societies. The other is a telephone pole that chills in the woods making funny sounds until someone comes too close. Not exactly what I would call a fair fight. In order to even the odds, we're gonna have to nerf our insanity-inducing entity just a little bit. It's actually gonna be one heck of a nerf, so let's go through our Nyarlathotep vs Siren Head 2.0 patch notes. First things first, we gotta take all those otherworldly powers down a peg. No more insta-kills, no more inflicting immediate madness on anyone who views his abominable forms. Sorry. This means limiting Nyarlathotep's shape-shifting abilities down to a level where they are no longer limitless. It would be best to keep him from shifting into things that are incomprehensible to mortals. Maybe make him stick to shifting into plants, animals, and assorted man-made objects. Eldritch horrors are cool, but aren't much fun in a fight. We're trying to make this last at least a little while. We're also gonna limit traveling between dimensions. I'm totally okay with traveling through 3 dimensions, because Siren Head can do that too. Any higher dimensions than that, and the lanky lad loses all ability to fight back. Speaking of other dimensions and things beyond human comprehension, no enlisting outside help, no bringing in outer gods or old ones, and no using their powers. Although I do think it would make sense for Siren Head to have a little help. Maybe give him access to all his siren homies. There's probably a few dozen of them out there based on reports of different shaped entities spread across North America. So let them congregate and have the numbers advantage. Probably won't make a huge difference, but it's worth a shot. It would also probably be advisable to set some lopsided victory parameters. Let's not make it a fight to the death. Instead, it would be interesting to make it a bit of a hunt. Put both of them in the woods and see if Siren Head could survive an hour or something. That way, it's in a familiar environment that it's adapted to and doesn't have to play to the strengths that Nyarlathotep obviously outclasses it in. Or maybe it's a competition instead of a traditional fight, something along the lines of who can eat more humans faster. I can see Nyarlathotep falling into old habits and tormenting humans, really indulging in the pain and suffering before devouring them. Siren Head, on the other hand, would plow through these people snacks like chicken tendies on Super Bowl Sunday. Playing some nice dinner music from his sirens, he'd get his munch on for sure. I guess it's not really a fight though, so we would probably bring it back to the woods-based hunt. In the end, it would be neat to start both of them at opposite ends of a national park and then set the timer for 1 hour. 20 siren heads versus Nyarlathotep. No holds barred, if one siren head is left standing, they win. Of course, there's nothing anyone can do to prevent Nyarlathotep from destroying the remaining cryptids after the fight ends and our silly rules disappear, but hey, that's a fight for you. Now, as the timer starts and the fight begins, I should probably mention that Nyarlathotep's intelligence did not receive a handicap for this battle. He is just as cunning, manipulative, and terrifying as ever. This is bad news for Siren Head, as it's hard to comment on the intelligence of a sentient speaker pole. It seems like a predator with killer instinct, but does it have human-like intelligence? Even though it uses information about its victims' loved ones to lure prey in, that doesn't seem like it has true sapience. It's just somehow playing back things that person has said before with some supernatural force. So it wouldn't be long before Nyarlathotep lured a few siren heads in by shapeshifting into a human and pretending to be eaten. Once the hungry loudspeakers were close enough, he could transform into a wide variety of killing machines. Weapons, construction equipment, a bomb, who knows? It's likely that at least half our siren head battalion would quickly fall to this strategy. We're down to 10 with another 55 minutes to go. Oh boy. The timer is the biggest factor here thanks to Nyarlathotep's sadistic personality. It is very possible that he would take his sweet time eviscerating the siren heads. We don't know very much about what makes them tick, but you can bet that Nyarlathotep would find out what scares and hurts them, and use that to cause as much pain as possible. That's just who he is. Who knows? Maybe he would just give up on winning and do what he loves to do. Honestly, that's probably the one scenario where Siren Head would have a sliver of a chance at winning this contest. But until that timer runs out, Nyarlathotep would roam the woods, methodically culling each tree-shaped creature he came across. Like a lumberjack in a forest glade, he would knock down anything that looks like it might be a tall resource. All the while, remaining Siren Heads would likely remain very still, doing their best to blend in with the foliage. Maybe one would let out a little siren whimper, and that would be it for the skinny beast. As the slaughter progresses, Nyarlathotep would develop a taste for killing Siren Heads. It would be a totally different experience than humans. Much stronger, with very different reactions to pain and fear, it would be a brand new day for our awful outer god. This is actually the downfall of Nyarlathotep under this particular set of rules. It would be too much fun to drive Siren Heads to madness. So, much like he doesn't end humanity as we know it because he wants to continue basking in the glory of hysteria, Nyarlathotep would spare a couple Siren Heads. There's no way he could maximize his full cruel enjoyment in an hour. Like a hunter making sure they don't overdo it and doom a species to extinction, he would let the remaining creatures go free. So, surprisingly, Siren Head would win this fight. But, I mean, are they really winning if that means being subjected to lifetime after lifetime of immeasurable torment, suffering, and agony? And remember, this is a very strange fight with a lot of mitigating circumstances to make it enjoyable. I am by no means saying that Siren Head could ever go toe-to-toe with Nyarlathotep. What I am saying is that under a very restrictive set of rules, maybe Nyarlathotep would have too much fun torturing to ever achieve victory through extinction. How could he enjoy the delicious eternal aching of a species knowing it's at the whim of a sadist without the species? A little far-fetched, but it was fun to consider. So, that's it. The answer to what would happen if Nyarlathotep fought Siren Head. Siren Head would die unless some wildly powerful referees stepped in and worked day and night to make it a fair fight. And well, I don't think there are any referees strong enough to control an outer god. Rest in peace, Siren Head.
Hey guys, welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions. I'll be your host, Jared Bronstein, and today we'll be talking about one of the greatest battles of all time. Maybe not of all time, but definitely one of the biggest battles on this channel. What if Nyarlathotep fought Cthulhu? Now before we see how this fight would pan out, let's talk about each one of these creatures, or gods, are. What they are capable of, how they behave, and then who would win in a fight between the two. Starting with Nyarlathotep, the outer god who could take the form or shape of pretty much anything and everything. Nyarlathotep also has a ton of other names, such as the Crawling Chaos, Face Eater, Father of all Bats, the Skinless One. Really, I could go on and on. It seems this guy has 20 plus names. Most likely due to the fact that he turns into different types of creatures, or beings, or gods, or whatever you'd call it. Unlike the majority of Lovecraft's other outer gods, or great old ones, Nyarlathotep is quite destructive. Not to say Lovecraft's other creations aren't, but in comparison, Nyarlathotep is one of the worst. I mean, this is in the sense that he has a goal to destroy, whereas the others have the ability, but no real purpose or agenda. Nyarlathotep is known to be a messenger of sorts for the other outer gods and prefers to just spread destruction and madness among his victims rather than just kill him. Another important distinction between Nyarlathotep and Lovecraft's other work, including Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep can walk the earth, speak human languages, and blend into our everyday society. This could certainly work to his advantage, whether he wanted to take over the earth or build an army to help fight Cthulhu. In this case, it'd be the latter. And speaking of Cthulhu, let's talk about him next. Is it even a him? Probably shouldn't assume. Either way, Cthulhu is easily the most popular and well-known creation from Lovecraft. Featured or referenced in comics, video games, TV shows, movies, you name it, Cthulhu has conquered it. So what is Cthulhu and what is it capable of? Well, for starters, Cthulhu is known to have quite a large cult following. That being said, Cthulhu is believed to be in a deep slumber, more specifically, a death-like slumber. Although Cthulhu is incredibly powerful, unlike Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu doesn't necessarily set out to destroy, at least while sleeping. Upon Cthulhu's awakening, the plan would be to take over and destroy the Earth. In regards to appearance, Cthulhu is described as a mix of a dragon, octopus, and human, with a massive scaly body and a tentacled head. Some claim Cthulhu also had wings of sorts. However, it's also been stated that Cthulhu's true form is incomprehensible to the human eye. So who knows what Cthulhu really looks like? The version we see is only the version we can perceive Cthulhu as, when in reality, Cthulhu may be much larger or grotesque than meets the eye. Alright, so now that we have some backstory on these two, what happens if they fight each other? Well, there's a few ways to look at this, and unfortunately, I will say now, it's hard to state a clear winner. Let's explore why that is. For starters, Nyarlathotep, if he wanted to, could technically transform into Cthulhu. Nyarlathotep is a master shapeshifter, meaning regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep can always make himself bigger. However, we don't fully understand how powerful Cthulhu really is due to the fact that it's been in a deep slumber under the ocean. Upon awakening, Cthulhu could take over or destroy the world, the same thing Nyarlathotep is set out to do. So clearly both powerful enough gods, or beings, that they could both destroy the Earth. They also have their own armies in a sense. As previously mentioned, Cthulhu has a cult following, the Cult of Cthulhu, real original. Nyarlathotep has the ability to be extremely manipulative and transform into that of a human, so who's to say he couldn't lead the entire human race on a hunt to destroy the evil Cthulhu? See what I'm getting at here? The battle between these two wouldn't be just that. Instead, it'd be the army of Cthulhu, aka his worshippers, going against whoever Nyarlathotep has manipulated into fighting alongside him, or I guess for him. Ultimately, those who were coerced into this war would most certainly be killed by the beings that are Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep. When it came down to the head-to-head battle, it really is tough to dissect who would win the fight and why. Given the circumstances that Nyarlathotep can morph into anyone or anything, I would say he has the advantage. Regardless of Cthulhu's size, Nyarlathotep would definitely morph into something bigger and more powerful. Of course, Cthulhu awakening would most certainly mean the end of the world and human civilization as we know it. If these two were to duke it out, it seems Nyarlathotep would ultimately have the upper hand. But as previously mentioned, between Cthulhu's cult and Nyarlathotep's manipulative ways, I think the battle between these two may start a World War III of sorts. Whoever isn't being controlled by Cthulhu would be controlled by Nyarlathotep, and that would leave two groups fighting on behalf of these gods. When one of the groups perished, the god without any soldiers left, if you'd call them that, would easily kill any human. Ultimately, this battle would see the human race pinned against each other, depending whose war they're fighting. When Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep actually were to come face to face, Nyarlathotep would have the upper hand and most likely destroy Cthulhu. However, Nyarlathotep enjoys destruction and chaos, which could lead to his downfall. Looking at the other side of things, Cthulhu would certainly do everything in its power to kill Nyarlathotep once and for all, whereas Nyarlathotep would most likely try to find ways to torture or prolong the death of Cthulhu. The beautiful thing about Lovecraft's work is that there is so much room for imagination, creativity, and interpretation to come into play. My version of Cthulhu may be different from your version, and the same goes for Nyarlathotep. These fictional creatures are just that, fictional, and in regards to Lovecraft's work, it seems to be quite ambiguous. Now thankfully, the end of the world isn't near, at least that we're aware of, and these two will never get to the point that their battle leads to the destruction of the world and the human race.